Welcome to today's edition of Perspectives and Pathways. According to data released by the Law School Survey of Student Engagement, 25% of students entering law schools in the fall of 2023 identified as first gen. We're defining that as students whose parents or other close relatives did not attend law school and who in many cases do not hold a four-year degree. Jones Day's Rasha Shields and Eli Jones both fit in that category and are here today to talk about their backgrounds, the transition from law school to lawyer, and advice they have for law students and new lawyers coming from similar circumstances. Rasha, Eli, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
All right, before we get into today's topic or subject matter, Rasha, you and I have talked before, but for people who don't know you or haven't heard you before in one of these programs, tell us a little about you and your background and how you arrived at Jones Day.
Sure, just a little bit of background about me. I'm a partner at Jones Day's Los Angeles office. And in terms of how I got here, it's a long path. I was born in Cairo, Egypt, and I came to the United States with my parents when I was very young. I was about 2 years old, and we had very modest means. We lived in a city not too far away from the city of LA. And I was a public school kid from kindergarten all the way through law school. I had no family or friends who were lawyers. My uncles, who immigrated with us at the same time, were the first to go to college here in the United States. And my older brother and I kind of followed their footsteps. I went to UC Irvine for undergrad and then UCLA for law school. And during law school, I learned about clerking, and I did a district court clerkship and then a Ninth Circuit clerkship. And when I was at my Ninth Circuit clerkship, that's the first time I learned about Jones Day, or really was exposed to Jones Day, and came and joined their issues and appeals group because I wanted to do a combination of trial work and appellate work.
Last time we talked, you told me about emigrating from Egypt when you were very young. Just have you ever been back?
I have not yet been back to Egypt,
Okay.
which is really sad.
Yeah, you'll get there. I've got a feeling. Hey, by the way, I will give you $5 if you'll tell us what is UC Irvine's nickname. What's the mascot?
uh, well, the anteater, zot, zot, zot.
The anteaters. Rasha, you got to be tough to defend a nickname like that. So kudos to you. So anyway, so let's switch to Eli for a quick second. Eli, again, tell us about your background, where you were before you got to Jones Day, and how you got here and what you're doing now.
Well, first off, I'm an associate here in Jones Day's Pittsburgh office. I'm from a little bit north of here, a town called Erie, Pennsylvania, is where I grew up. My father was a public school teacher. My mom was a small business owner. And so, growing up, both of them had went to college, but no one in our families before them, and no one had been to law school. They have no lawyers in my immediate family or my extended family. So, growing up, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do. I did mock trial in high school, and I had a local judge who was our coach say, "Oh, you kind of got a knack for this. I think you'd be good at it." So I think I took that and ran with it. I went to Duquesne University here in Pittsburgh for undergrad. And then I went to the University of Virginia for law school. And then I was a summer associate here at Jones Day in the summer of 2020 when everything first shut down because of the coronavirus. So I did a fully virtual summer here and really appreciated the firm and how they stuck with us and how they forged a connection while we were here. And so after that round, as soon as I graduated, I came back and I've been here ever since.
I'm familiar with Erie, Pennsylvania. I mean, it's about an hour and 20 minutes from Cleveland, honestly. I've been there for hockey tournaments. I ran the Erie Marathon, believe it or not, almost 2 years ago. You come from a wonderful part of the world. It's beautiful up there, the parks and everything.
It's wonderful. I hope you did not visit between like fall and spring. Like if you're anywhere in those winter months, that's when it's like not great. But no, it's a wonderful place.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right on the lake, right? I've
Yeah.
driven to Buffalo in January from Cleveland. That's no fun either. Okay. Well, good getting to know you both a little bit better. Let's talk about being a first generation lawyer. Duquesne and the University of Virginia, UC Irvine and UCLA. Impressive credentials, both. Honestly, having said that, how did your backgrounds, and you both described your backgrounds, your families a little bit, how did that affect how you performed in law school, do you think? Let's go to Rasha first.
Seeing my parents work very hard. They had a very hard work ethic and they had blue collar jobs. And I just saw that I had this opportunity. And so I think that kind of drove me to work even harder. I will tell you, it was kind of shocking to see what summer associates made when I was in law school. And that, like, I actually had some guilt around, like, I was making pretty much almost what my parents were making their entire year working, I was making it during the summer when I was getting wined and dined, right? And so that was kind of like a shock to me, and that was new. But that kind of drove me to see the opportunities that were at my doorstep essentially, and wanted to work hard to help myself and my family. And so the work ethic and just putting in the time to do things right stuck with me, and I think led me to succeed.
Yeah, you would think so, right? Because someone from a different background, maybe more upper middle class or however we're defining these things nowadays, might have been a little bit different. Maybe you assume certain things are going to happen, or maybe you take, I hate cliches, but maybe you take certain things for granted, whatever. But obviously, there's an impetus right there. And let me ask you this, and you can tell me it's none of my business if you want to, but did you feel a little extra pressure maybe? It's like, hey, my mom and dad came from fairly modest means. I've got an opportunity now. I got to push, 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 step on the gas. How'd that feel?
Yeah, I definitely felt some pressure, and part of it too is that they also had no clue, how difficult law school was, because if they've never gone through it, or a great example is, when I was like, "Oh, I'm studying for the bar. I can't make anything, right? I'm not going to any family functions." They're like, "Oh, you pass everything. I'm sure you'll be fine." If you're completely outside of the legal field, you actually don't know that is there are people who don't pass the bar. It is a difficult thing to do. So even just them understanding how much time I had to put in for law school and studying for the bar, that was all foreign to them. And so I think people who grow up with lawyers, they've already been exposed to that. And so there was extra pressure being like, everyone assumes I will succeed. And I didn't know if that was going to happen.
You hit on something really interesting. It's like you maybe felt some guilt because, I can't make that second cousin's wedding. I've got to study. It's the bar exam. I've been working for this for my whole life. And again, somebody who hasn't been there, or maybe forget law school, maybe just even, higher level academia, wherever it is, college degree, an MBA, whatever, maybe they don't get it. So I can appreciate how that would be this subtle pressure that maybe people don't think about. Eli, how about you? Now, you mentioned, I think your dad was an educator, fairly conventional, traditional, middle class, Erie, Pennsylvania background, right? How did that help you, better or worse, in law school in terms of your peers and how you performed and how it all went?
Well, I think what my parents both did, they really instilled into me the importance of hard work and staying dedicated and consistent on things. My dad has been teaching, I think, 28 years now, and so I mean, I think I can count on one hand the amount of days of school he's ever missed for illness or whatever else. And then my mom, as a business owner, she always was emphasizing that consistency and dedication to what you're trying to do is what gets you over the hump and what gets you to where you need to be. And so, yeah, coming from a place like Erie, where a lot of people are very, Western Pennsylvania, very put your head down, do what you're supposed to do, and good things will happen. I think I took that to law school and kind of treated it like a 9 to 5, and go to the library, do my readings, go home, eat dinner and spend time with my wife, and then go about doing whatever else. And working on time management, I think, was a big thing. And that dedication to perfecting what you're supposed to be doing is something that my background helped me out with a lot. In terms of how it impacted my law school experience, similar to what Rasha was saying, if you don't have a reference point for a lot of stuff, law school can be kind of disorienting at times in terms of if you're not familiar with the legal field, sometimes because so many people are, it's, I don't want to say law is like a hereditary profession, but there are a lot of people at law school whose parents or immediate family are lawyers. And so when exam season comes, their families, they have a better concept of what's going on and what you're going through. Whereas my family wasn't bad about it, but it is easier to talk about it and vent to people that understand what you're going through. And so sometimes I would talk about things that were going on at school, and my family would be supportive, but they don't fully know what I'm talking about or getting at. And so there are times where those reference points where you can either A, expect things on the front end, or B, vent about them on the tail end. You miss out on that a little bit as a first generation student, I would say.
Hey, let's go back. You mentioned time management. And by the way, we don't wing it here. We do research, we prepare. But it did say that first gen law students have pressures in circumstances that a lot of other students don't have. And they mentioned that. Maybe they went back to law school later after undergrad. Maybe that you mentioned you're married. Try balancing that, I bet, with being in class and studying 60 hours a week, all that other stuff. So there are challenges there for any law student, but I suppose a first generation law student might feel a little differently because you haven't seen anybody else do it, right? Talk about that. I want to hear Rasha talk about that too, but talk about time management going back. And you guys have been out of school for a few years, but that's a heavy hill to climb, isn't it?
For time management, like you mentioned, I did get married. I got married in July and then moved to Virginia in August, the first year of law school. So we were kind of trying a lot of new stuff all at once. But I think time management, especially early on, because law school, it's not you're constantly turning in like homework or papers. It's just being prepared to engage in class and doing the readings and going through the notes and working through your case books and things like that and taking your own notes at your own pace. And so figuring that out and figuring out how to develop study habits was a really big thing for me. Prior to law school, I was not particularly good at setting habits and sticking with them for studies specifically. And so for law school, you get these big gaps between these very long classes. I had to work at it, especially that first semester, at cultivating the habit of going and finding a cubicle at the library and sitting down and just really locking down on whatever I'm supposed to be focusing on at that time and regimenting the week in a way that you're focusing on certain classes at a pace that you know. So, for example, contracts, I was not as adept at as like criminal law or some of my other courses. And so I knew I'd save contracts for earlier in the day when I had more energy. Whereas criminal law, which I found to be a bit more leisurely because I was interested in it more, I could save for later in the day. And so working on strategizing and like sticking to that habit was a big thing for me.
That is so smart. You hit the heavy stuff in the morning or things that didn't come as naturally to you, and then save what was more, you said natural before. Were you a good student? Did school come easy to you?
For the most part, as a youth, I would say. And then college, I did fairly well. The LSAT was sort of the first time something sort of hit me square in the chest in terms of not being particularly adept at it. And then I think the LSAT sort of set the precursor for law school, where it emphasized that law school is not just about like your capacity to learn and retain information, but also change and molding the way that you think about things. And so that's a big part of law school is that I think a lot of people will talk to me and think like, oh, you have to have a certain level of intellect and you have to be smart and you have to like to read and all that. But the shifting of how you think about things was the big thing for me, I found in going to law school.
Eli, great points. Let's go back to Rasha a little bit. Rasha, talk about generally maybe some of the other challenges that you encountered being a first gen law student.
One of the biggest challenges for a first generation law student is feeling like you're starting off already behind, right? And it's that whole concept of like imposter syndrome or like, do I even belong here? And so much of I think law school exams and everything is there's so much pressure, so it can really be a mental game. So to me, it's kind of overcoming that kind of feeling like you're behind. You may hear people talking about like, oh, well, I had my mom or dad review my lawyering skills memo, or I'm going to work with my dad's firm this summer. So they're already having things that are secure. So that was, I think, one of the biggest barriers or feeling like challenges that you felt like you were having to overcome a big hurdle just as everyone was starting off. So I think that was one of my biggest challenges.
I've known you a couple years. That surprises me because you always come across as confident, polished, energetic, whatever. It's interesting for me to hear someone like you say, you know what? Yeah, I felt like maybe I didn't have certain things going for me that some of my classmates or some of my peers did. So what do you do about that, Rasha? You work harder, you work smarter, you find a mentor. What happens then?
Yeah, I think when you feel that, to me, it was even more of a motivator to work harder because I felt like maybe I was behind. And part of it too is that one of the challenges is that you also just don't have a roadmap of this is what I'm working towards. Oh, I should get an externship, or I should work for big law this summer, or I should do a clerkship. Those weren't already pre-planned for me as I started off. It's all kind of just trying to figure it out as I went along. And so to me it was just, convincing myself that I had to even study harder than some of my peers, and then also reaching out to some professors and others that those were the network that I had at my disposal. I didn't have others, and so using the resources that were offered at UCLA, where it was how I kind of tried to make up that gap that I at least imagined. It may not have existed, but it's more about like, perception is reality. And so that's how I tried to overcome that feeling.
Sure. Sure. Eli, I saw you nodding as Rasha was talking. I take it you concur with much of what she was saying. You can relate.
Yeah, I think so. Law school, especially because of how grading is handed out, they grade on a curve, and class rank is such a big thing in legal education. And the testing method is not anything you're used to. You don't take a test that's like a law school test prior to law school. And so, yeah, certainly, especially for the first, I would say the first whole year, I was telling myself, I'm not sure I can keep up. I'm not sure that I'm supposed to be here. Maybe this is a level above where I should be at. And the imposter syndrome is very real. And you sort of wait for the slow trickle of grades and see how you compare to your classmates. It was difficult at first. Similar to Rasha said, it emphasized the need to really buckle down and work as hard. And then eventually the confidence came after you achieve a couple of things and think, okay, I got it. I have the capabilities and the faculties, but definitely concur with that experience.
How long did that take? Because and I think we're running around the same theme here. Had you had a parent who'd been through an incredibly rigorous academic experience like whether it's law school, med school, a PhD program, whatever, you sense that, and they relate, and they tell you how to prepare and how to read, how to crack a book, and how to get ready for a semester and so forth. You didn't have that. At what point, Eli, did you think, all right, I've got it figured out? Was that most of the first semester, end of first year? Obviously, it all ended well. You're here, right? But when did you start to feel like, okay, I got it? How long did that take?
I would say probably the end of the first year, like 2 semesters. I got some good grades in some classes, and I'm thinking, okay, it's not a fluke. It happened twice. I know what I'm doing. And you kind of have a familiarity with how law school goes from then. And then, of course, getting the offer from Jones Day after on campus interview certainly did not hurt either. Whenever I got that summer offer too, I'm like, okay, I'm feeling good. I think I'm in a good place.
Sure, sure. Let's talk about the makeup of your classmates and your peers when you were there. I've got data right here that says that first gen law students tend to be more racially diverse than maybe most of the rest of the student body or the classes. Was that your experience, either at UCLA or Virginia? Did you say the first gens that I know, they come from families that maybe mom or dad wasn't a lawyer or maybe even didn't go to college? What'd you guys encounter?
I'll start at UCLA. I think I didn't even know who the first gen people were. And that's one of the things I'm seeing now at law schools is that there are actually like first generation affinity groups, which I think is phenomenal. But that's one of the things is like when you don't even you feel like you're the only one or and until you talk. But I do tend to think that it is there are more diverse folks who tend to be first generation, but it's much more a issue of like socioeconomic status, which kind of cross all racial groups. And so I would find those in all racial groups then, and those are people I tended to gravitate towards for kind of bonding over kind of common experience. I wish I knew exactly what the racial makeup was. It just wasn't something that was obvious or talked about, I would say, back when I was in law school. But I'm a little older than Eli. So maybe Eli has a better perspective.
Pick it up, Eli. What do you think?
Yeah. So my second year of law school, I believe, they actually founded the first generation professionals group at UVA Law. And so it was actually fairly new when I was in law school as well. I did notice talking to my classmates in the Black Law Students Association that a lot of folks there, similar to me, did not have any lawyers in their immediate family. Even folks that had parents with professional backgrounds, no lawyers. So that gets back to sort of the lack of reference point, and this being kind of a new experience for people. So that was an additional commonality in addition to everyone being members of the Black Law Students Association. But in addition to what Rasha said, I did notice when the first generation group opened its doors and started getting members that it was a very diverse group racially, but it did cut across all groups, similar to what Rasha was saying. The socioeconomic class and background of the various members was definitely the running theme that I noticed for sure. But it was very racially diverse when it got started.
Let's talk about transitioning from law student to working lawyer as you are now. Talk about starting that job search, whether it was the summer after your first year or later on. What were you looking for, Rasha? And where'd you go for help, assistance, guidance, direction?
When I first came into law school, I had no idea what type of lawyer I wanted to be. When I was in college, I had little part-time jobs, both at, I was like a file clerk at a small law firm, and then ended up being kind of like a legal assistant for a solo practitioner. But that taught me nothing about what I would want to do really when I was a lawyer, and so it was kind of following the herd. It was once I heard, "Oh, there's gonna be some on-campus interviews for first-year lawyers, and if you did well, maybe you can apply." I said, "Okay, I guess I'm gonna apply." And so that's how my process went. So I did OCI for the firms and other, like, agencies that came to UCLA to recruit 1Ls, and that's how I obtained the first summer associate position that I had. But it's like trial and error and just trying to follow what others were doing because I didn't know in advance what I was looking for.
Was UCLA helpful? I mean, that's a great law school. I got to imagine they had resources, there was direction, and people you could go to for help and guidance, right?
Yeah, so at UCLA, they had career services, so you could talk to them about, where should you even be applying. But it was really the formal process of just, hey, here is one day where these firms will be here, or the DA's office and others. And so just submitting your resume. And so that's how I kind of stumbled across my first position. And then also when I was doing on campus interviewing for my 2L summer as well.
Eli, what about you? Talk about, and again, you summered at Jones Day, but even more broadly than that, after your first year, say, or well into your first year of law school, you're trying to get some traction, trying to make some contacts, get some career direction. Where do you start? And maybe why might have that been a bit more challenging being a first gen law student?
Determining what you want out of practice can be harder when you don't know any lawyers in terms of understanding what the difference is between various levels, whether like a smaller or medium firm or a boutique firm, or what city you want to practice in, or what field you want to like specialize in to the extent that you do. That can be a little more difficult. It was kind of broader for me. I didn't really understand what it meant to, specialize in my head. Initially, I kind of was thinking, well, I'm getting a law degree. I'm going to be a lawyer. But what kind of lawyer is a much more specific and important question. And so when I came to law school and I'm starting to figure out the job search, the big thing that kind of hit me was, and UVA's career services office does a very good job of this as well, emphasizing to you what market you want to practice in and why, and making that decision was a very big deal for me as someone who had recently been married, because that's a family decision as opposed to an individual decision at that point, because we're all living together and thinking about clerkship, whether or not that's viable, whether or not you want to do that. Getting the career timeline and sort of the direction was the big thing that I had to work on formulating as the first lawyer in my family. Eventually we settled on Pittsburgh, and then Jones Day sort of jumped out as an option that made the most sense for us. But making that decision and getting to the point where we decided, all right, we want to live in Pittsburgh, I want to practice in Pittsburgh and be a Pennsylvania lawyer. That was a process that took a couple of different steps and a couple of different meetings with folks to really reach that conclusion.
How do you get there? Is it just by being around the law school, the placement office, career services, classmates? Is it by osmosis, or did you have a mentor? Or if you had to look back and say, this is where I kind of feel like I headed for certain in this direction, who helped?
Well, I would say my wife definitely helped in terms of having that conversation. And we charted out our priorities for our family and what we wanted to do in my career. So that was a big part of it. But then, in addition to that, many of my classmates and colleagues who are from the Pittsburgh area or Western Pennsylvania in general, talking it over with them, talking it over with my other classmates and friends, and talking to them about what they want out of practice, and doing a compare and contrast, but also mentors that are professors and mentors from other attorneys that I got connected with from classmates through law school who happened to know lawyers before they came. I was able to have discussions with a variety of people and talk through and make decisions, not to just select the city that I wanted to work in, but also eventually come to the conclusion that Jones Day in particular made sense for me. So I'd say it's a communal effort, or a communal melting pot of advice and insights that I really leaned on to make the conclusions that I did.
Well said. Rasha, what would you add? Because you must have had mentors, people who helped along the way and helped you make some decisions that got you here and things are going well. How do you cultivate those sorts of relationships or those sorts of people that want to be in your corner and can help?
Especially as a first generation professional, you need mentors, sponsors, even more so than potentially others may need them. And so for me, it started off in law school of really finding some professors that really were motivators, they were mentors, they were sounding boards. I was a teaching assistant for one, a research assistant for another, and those became really great relationships to helped me also with clerkship applications, and they were my recommenders, and someone who would pick up the phone to recommend me to a judge here. And so those became, I think, the foundation. I didn't have any other kind of network to use, so the professors were my first network, and then I would say then the judges that I clerked for became a different network, and that just kind of kept building throughout my career. And so I've been blessed with, mentors, sponsors that have opened up doors that I didn't even knew existed because of those types of relationships. And for me, it's just, working hard, doing a good job, and reaching out to them and actually asking for their advice. That also kind of gets them almost invested in my career because they feel like they have the ability to help. And so that has been what has worked for me of kind of creating that relationship and the network of folks that have helped me get to where I am.
You know what I liked about what you just said? You were subtle, but you kept saying, "I worked at this. I worked for this clerk, this judge. I did research for this faculty member. I worked for this professor." Blah blah. You didn't just raise your hand. Oh, I'm raising my hand in class. Oh, I'm getting good grades. You were proactive. It seems like you sought out opportunities so someone could see what you could do, and suddenly that makes it pretty easy for somebody to pick up the phone and make a recommendation or be a great reference, whatever. But I'm getting on my lane here. But I think what you said there, it packed quite the punch. We have two more questions. You guys have been great, by the way. Two more questions, and these are my favorite two questions. I'm tipping my hand here, but I think you're gonna like this. Okay, looking back, is there anything? We'll go to Eli first. Is there anything you wish you'd known? Looking at Go back to young Eli. He's in law school first, maybe early second year. What do you wish you'd known that you know now?
Well, funny enough, it's actually what Rasha just got done saying. It was the network and the importance of having people in your corner makes such a big difference. And because similar to what we were talking about earlier, hard work is obviously important in this profession, but so is people you know and cultivating positive relationships with not just your classmates, but professors and visiting judges who come in. Law schools do a great job of bringing people in to talk to students. And to be honest, a lot of people go and they just enjoy the free lunch, but going up to shake hands, getting business cards, all of this stuff, and getting your name out there in a positive way and having people know who you are can make all the difference in the world. And so, really cultivating and working on that positive network was something that I wish I would have gotten started on earlier, working on getting better at doing that every day. But I wish I'd gotten a better head start on it. So, that's what I would have changed if I was younger.
Interesting. Rasha, what would you say? What do you wish the younger Rasha had known when she was early in law school or trying to get her career going?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on what Eli said, the importance of relationships. Like, it was clear to me, that I needed the like professors and other things like that. I didn't realize until later on in my career how important your peers are also in terms of developing the relationship and maintaining those relationships. And I went to law school pre social media. So now it's a lot easier to stay in contact with people and actually feel like you haven't lost contact because you could follow them on LinkedIn and other things, comment. And but back then, it's I wish I had known there that it would have been very important to also, maintain those relationships that you had. And because again, I think lawyering is all about the relationships. And I went to school with people that we had great interactions, but just lost touch. And it's a lot harder to reach out to them and like, oh hi, you're now general counsel of this company, I'd love to take you out for lunch. You can do that, but it's a lot easier and seamless if you've developed those relationships and maintain them throughout the entire time.
Sure, sure. Good advice. Last question, and forgive me if it's too similar to the previous question. I don't want to play demolition derby with your responses here, but Is there any advice you'd give to a law student or someone about to graduate from law school? We talked about the importance of networking, contacts, hard work. Anything else come to mind? Rasha, you first.
I'm going to take a word that you used, but being proactive. You have to take ownership over your legal career and you have to kind of reach out to people. And especially when people say, like, hey, feel free to reach out to me if you need anything, actually taking them up on that offer and maintaining contact and staying in contact. I have mentees that some of them are very proactive, and that has kept me invested in their careers. And so over the years, I've maintained contact. There's others that I'll have a great conversation once and then never hear from them again. And it's a lot harder to keep those relationships going. So being proactive and following up with your mentors, I think, is a great key to succeeding.
Very well stated. Eli, the pressure is on.
Yeah.
I made you go last because she probably stole all the good sound bites. But is there anything you relate to a law student or a lawyer very early in his or her career that, some advice?
Yeah, I think it's related to what Rasha was saying about being proactive, but I would say be confident. It can be intimidating when a judge or like a very established lawyer comes to your law school and, they just gave a talk. You might feel, I don't want to bother them. I don't want to be like in their space. You should be confident, take that step. They're there for a reason to meet students, and take that effort to be proactive or reach out to that professor. It might take a couple of tries because people are busy, but remaining confident and reminding yourself that you're where you're supposed to be and that you have the skills and the charms, I guess, for lack of a better word, to make a positive impact on people really would have helped me stay proactive. And so I think that's really important, is to be confident in who you are and to make those connections.
Rasha, Eli, we will leave it right there. Hey, thank you
Thank
both.
you for
Yeah, thank
having
you
us.
for having us.
For complete biographies and contact information for Rasha and Eli, visit jonesday.com. Subscribe to Jones Day Talks at Apple Podcasts or wherever else quality podcasts can be found. Perspectives and Pathways and Jones Day Talks programs are both produced by Tom Condolis. As always, we thank you for listening. I'm Dave Dalton. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Jones Day Talks. Comments heard on Jones Day Talks should not be construed as legal advice regarding any specific facts or circumstances. The opinions expressed on Jones Day Talks are those of lawyers appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect those of the firm. For more information, please visit jonesday.com.